Today we're talking the dress of my dreams. Hello and welcome. My name is Megan and this is Megafly DIY, a place where I share my sewing projects, home DIYs, and general crafty goodness. So I've had this image pinned to my Pinterest board for years and years, but just never really had that motivation to do anything about it. Then I found this ditzy floral fabric at an estate sale and things started to slowly take form, but I still hadn't found that push that I needed. But this year, it all came together. I was perusing through Rosery Apparel's Instagram and was reminded of when Janelle made this dress. While I had done shearing before, I never thought to incorporate spacing into the design, and so the idea continued to evolve. And one day I found this pattern, McCall's 6741. I was particularly drawn to view C, and so I started to make my dress. I had some odd notions and not a fully formed picture, so I knew a chaos project was about to begin. Rather than make the bodice and the skirt separate, which I should have done, I was oddly attached to keeping this princess seam pattern as is, with the bodice and the skirt being attached. Having decided this, I knew I wouldn't be able to pre-shear the bodice, but I should have, so I decided to eke out all the extra circumference that I could in the bodice. Now my pattern went up to size 16, and so I measured the waistline of a size 16, which gave me 48 inches. I subtracted 7.5 inches to incorporate the seam allowance, giving me 40.5 inches. Now I knew this measurement would fit over my shoulders and bust with a bit extra to spare, so I thought maybe this might work. I also decided to alter the back panel. Rather than having it be two pieces, I would cut it on the fold, and this would actually give me an additional 2 3/8 inches. And so I thought this would be big enough to account for the shearing. And so I draft and traced my pattern pieces and an additional 3 inches in length to the skirt. I simply added this additional length at the end of the skirt, which means the circumference of the hem is slightly wider, but I'm okay with that. After marking and cutting out all my pattern pieces, I prepped my material, which at a guess I would say is a rayon challis. I then went about laying out my pattern pieces, trying not to shift the material as much as possible, and cutting them out. Once all my pieces were cut out, I began by sewing my two front panels together. I decided to French seam the entire dress. Another weird decision I was oddly attached to. I had never French seamed a princess seam before, and so maybe that's why I was so attached to it. I just wanted to do it. Now, I followed a tutorial by Kittenish Behavior, which I will do my best to link below, where she describes the process of French seaming a princess seam. But essentially, start by pinning wrong sides together. Sewing at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Trimming that down to 1/8 inch seam allowance. Turn the fabric right sides together, press and pin, and sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance. This will encompass that 1/8 inch seam. Once this was done, I attached my pockets to the side front panels. I decided to French seam these as well. I had never French seamed a pocket before, and so I thought it would be fun, a new thing to learn. I followed a wonderful tutorial by Soften Studio. Again, I will do my best to link it down below. I found this tutorial very helpful and very well done. The only difference is in the future, I would understitch the pocket as opposed to top stitch, which she has you do in the tutorial. However, she's working with denim, which I think is spot on, but with a lighter weight material, I think understitching would be what I would choose in the future. Once the pockets are sewn in, I attach the front side panels to the front panel. I then move on to constructing the back, which is exactly the same, except the back panel is one piece as opposed to two because it's cut on the fold and there are no pockets. Then I attach one of the side seams. I believe I attached the wearer's left. At this point, I realize I had done nothing but work on the dress the day before, and I realized I needed a little bit of a break. Okay, a sleep in, which I desperately needed, a walk and some vitamin D, which I also desperately needed, and a huge chunk of the day has been taken up. Let's see, it is noon. I have no idea why I'm choosing to film this while walking uphill either. So the plan for today is mark out the waistband, which I should have done when I cut the dress out, but why think ahead? And then mark out my shearing lines, make sure everything matches up nice and clean, and then shear the dress. Oh, also mark out the center back neck opening because I'm omitting the zipper and it's a high neck dress. I do need a way to get it on and off, so got to do that. Also the dress together, put in the back centerpiece, and give it a try on. Will I be able to finish off the neck and the armholes today? Probably not, but that's all right. I'll be pretty happy if I get to try something on by the end of the day. Yeah, should be a good day. All right, I'll meet you back at the house. I realize I should have marked out the waistline on my pattern pieces when I was cutting them, but as this is an 80% baked chaos project, let's do that now. Once this line is marked on the waistline on the right side of the material in a water-soluble marker, I continue measuring and marking my shearing lines. I decide on a set of 4 lines separated by 1 1/2 inch. Each line will be separated by 3/8 inch. So the total set of 4 lines will measure 1 1/8 inch. My shearing prep looked something like this. I then continued this pattern all the way up into the top of the neck and shoulders. Before you start shearing, line up your unsewn side seam to make sure that all of your markings line up. If they don't, this is the time to make any adjustment. You'll also want to measure and mark where you'll be adding your neck opening. As I am omitting a zipper, I need a way of getting the dress on and off. So I find the center back of the center back panel and measure about 5.5 inches down the center line. I mark this and then measure from the bottom point around the circumference of the neck and back down to the bottom point. I then compare this with the circumference of my head to make sure that I can get the dress off and on over my head. I determined that it is, and so let the shearing commence. It will take some time. Your lines might not be the straightest. I know mine weren't, but stay the course. The end is in sight. When the shearing is done, you can make and finish your neck opening. Take a rectangle of fabric measuring approximately 6 or 6.5 inches by 1.5 or 2 inches. Place right sides together, pin in place, and sew 1/4 inch on each side of the marking, tapering to a point at the bottom. Like this. Then cut along the center marking. I chose to cut the 2 layers separately to avoid any ill-placed cutting. Cut all the way to the stitches at the point, but not past them. Then flip the fabric so wrong sides are together and press. Then fold each remaining material on each side in half and then again in on itself. It'll look something like this. At the point, fold the material at an angle like this and like this. Trim any excess and top stitch into place. Now with the neck opening in place, you can sew the side seam and the shoulder seams. Okay, now for a bit of a try on. And this is what I get for not pre-shearing. Oh well, lesson learned. Let the chaos continue. Luckily, I do have an idea as to how to make the bodice a little bit bigger and give my arms a little bit more room. I'm going to roughly draft up an arm cuff and attach this and see if it gives me the extra room that I need. Okay, I'm really liking where this is going. However, I'm still wanting to pick and fuss with the shoulders, and so I know things aren't quite right. Also, if you can see, the shearing at the top is quite nice. There's some good scrunch to it and texture. However, as you work your way down the bodice and around the bust, there is almost no scrunch because the elastic is almost completely stretched out. So I'm going to mock up another cuff, but a longer one that will continue just past my waistline to give me that extra room that I'm looking for. This means we have some seam ripping to do. Now that I've got my new pattern pieces cut, I pin and baste into place. I fuss and play around with the placement until I get the silhouette that I'm after. Then I serge it into place. After a last try on, I decide it's time to finish the dress. So I fold the neck opening in 1/4 inch, press that, fold it in another 1/4 inch, press that. And top stitch into place. Ultimately, I decide on a hook and eye closure, which I now sew into place as well. And now for the hem. This I also fold in 1/4 inch, press, fold in another 1/4 inch, press, and stitch into place. Finally, this dream Franken dress is done. Let's see how she looks. I suppose this is just my artistic process. I have an idea, partially baked, then jump in with both feet. While these chaos projects of mine can be a total headache and take way more time than necessary, I often end up with a unique idea and design that I was unlikely to come up with before I started the project. And I'm okay with that, because this dress is beautiful. Now, I certainly don't want this much of a struggle all the time. And so, what are my lessons learned? First, make the bodice and skirt separate. Pre-shear the bodice. When making a chaos project, pre-serge your material. You know there are going to be adjustments to be made. Don't fuss with a French seam. That is for the 2.0 version. And oh yes, there will be a 2.0 version. And in that version, I will add 1.5 to 2 inches in length on the bodice and an additional 1 inch in length on the skirt, for a total of 4 inches in length on the skirt and a total of 6 additional inches in the total dress length. How do your whimsical notions, your brain babies, partially baked ideas come to life? Are you a prepper and a planner, all aspects taken into consideration and executed perfectly? Or are you a perfect mess like me, stumbling your way through until you're happy enough with your outcome? Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you consider subscribing to see what's next. Have a wonderful day and happy sewing. Bye!